Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
You're saying Brexit? Oh my gosh!
You started it.
Gosh, I finally won an argument.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip, news and stories from our GB News dungeon here in the heart of Westminster. Today I've got an interesting lineup of guests for you. Two MPs, a Labour and a Tory MP, who are independently minded, who sit outside, I would argue, the kind of corporate structure of a party. David Davis, MP for the Tory party, and Stella Creasy, MP from Labour. It's a big week for Labour as the party prepares to confront difficult issues with large-scale welfare cuts expected to be announced next week, a spring statement from Rachel Reeves which could herald across-the-board hikes in other spending, and also increases in the cost of living with all bills going up, it seems, in April next month, and also freezing in income tax thresholds and other things too. Big issues here. But first, to Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow since 2010, a former frontbencher when Ed Miliband was leader, and a successful campaigner on issues as varied as payday loans, abortion rights for women in Northern Ireland, and maternity leave for female MPs. Stella Creasy, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. Great to have you here. Why do you think Labour was elected back in July?
Oh, look, I think two things were driving that election result. First and foremost, a recognition of the catastrophic mess that the Conservative government had made. And I think people were truly sick of them and sick of the infighting, sick of the economic decisions they made, and also just the cultural malaise of the Conservative government through the repeated iterations, whether it was Truss, whether it was Boris, whether it's Sunak. So people wanted them out. But I think there's a second half of that conversation, because I think it's not just about governments lose. I think it is also about people wanted stability because they felt a grave sense of uncertainty, and of course obviously that has multiplied since in world events, and they wanted people who had a vision about the kind of country we could become even if we were in a mess now. And that's what I think Labour set out at the election. I think your test for me is, how are we making that happen?
Exactly. I mean, do you worry the party has lost its way? I say this because you're slashing.
We are in under a year in. I know that people say a week is a long time in politics. It depends on how big your ambitions are, actually, because if your ambitions are big and radical, which is what people like me always want to go for, it's that, number one, when the country's in such a mess, don't mess it up. There's a ruder version of that as my test. But number two, my plan for elections is always make it count. Yes. Do something big and transformative. Labour governments at their best have always done that.
You're the conscience of the party, I think, in a good way.
That makes me feel old.
We're all getting old together, aren't we? I've known you for over a decade. So you slashed foreign aid by $6 billion. You've increased defence spending. They're keeping the 2-child benefit cap. They're cutting the civil service. They're cutting public services, tax on small farms, removing the warm homes allowance from old people. Is that what you campaigned for back in July? Isn't it all a bit of a disappointment?
So, I mean, we could come up with an alternative. We could trade lists of good things that have happened, breakfast clubs, building houses, the minimum wage increase, all of that, sorting out the NHS, getting more appointments. Actually, I think your listeners, your viewers probably want something more fundamental, which is, what's the big idea? And for somebody like me, number one, I've always believed there's nothing progressive about wasting money. So I'm absolutely ruthless about, when we do have a government, what is it doing to make the absolute best use of the resources at its hands? And that resource is not just economic, it's people. What are you doing to unlock talent? The reason I'm a socialist is because I believe that if we work together, we can get the best out of each other for the benefit of all of us. So my question always for the government is not just, is this a good idea, but how does it make that kind of country more likely? And one of the things that I've been doing recently, and I'm sure you follow my social media abjectively, Chris, is to try and say, look, here's something good, here's something we need to work on. Because one of the things I think right now in British politics is, frankly, people have been treated like children for too long, as if they can't cope with difficult challenges, difficult decisions. And, as a mother of 2 toddlers, don't be surprised that people throw their toys out of the pram if you do treat them like children. Let's take international aid. I am somebody who's passionate about international aid, not because I'm going to sit here and sing Kumbaya. It's great that Richard Curtis got an Oscar for all his humanitarian work, but that's comic relief. I have a cold, hard focus on the national security of this country, and I recognise that aid is part of soft power. So one of my challenges to my colleagues is, right, if you are concerned about people who are refugees coming over here on small boats, do you think cutting the aid budget and the work that we were doing to do conflict prevention, say in Nigeria, is going to make more people or less people flee from Boko Haram and therefore be one of the 1 in 8 people in this world who is fleeing conflict or climate change?
Because what you're saying is correct. Italy has spent hundreds of millions of euros in North Africa on programmes and have slowed or stopped the boats going across to Italy. It is working, as you say, elsewhere, but that case is not made by only...
Well, so, I mean, with the greatest one in the world, I did sit for 3.5 hours to try and make a debate because we've got a very high quality problem now. Now we've got so many Labour MPs, we don't get as many chances to speak as those of us who were around before had. And that's a good thing. That is a very high quality problem to have. But you prefigure my challenge, which is next week I shall be in Brussels for the European EU Parliamentary delegation, which is about the post-Brexit deal and how we're all working together. I feel very passionately we've got to get that right. But one of the things about Brexit is that the previous Conservative government chose not to cooperate on aid. The EU is the 3rd largest donor in the world. We all share a common security concern. But actually right now, in the conversations about security and defence, which are happening with Europe and are happening because Keir Starmer didn't walk into the room going, oh, the French, are you friend or foe, like Liz Trusted. He's like, actually...
She may have changed the tune, given what...
Yeah, she thinks everybody's her foe now.
She's
out with Steve Bannon, mate. I think we've got you've got to recalibrate a sense of where, and I would defend the right in that sense. But I absolutely want to see cooperation on aid funding and a lack of duplication on that alongside security funding, because for me they're two sides of the same coin. The best defence of this country is prevention of conflict in the first place. That's why when I was on the Council of Europe with Roger Gale, a Conservative, we challenged the Russians. We challenged the decision to let the Russians back in because at the time, and that was just when they were looking at the Donbass region of Ukraine, you know, you will know the history of this. The earlier you intervene, the more that you speak up, I think actually in the long run you get better outcomes for your country.
You want to be a European Union army then in Ukraine?
No, and let me be very clear. I'm not sat here wearing a blueberry with gold stars on. I know you would love me to, and to love me to be the last Remainer in the village, holding for. You know, I am absolutely ruthless. I am ruthlessly focused on what can we do now, because actually communities like mine are at the sharp end if we don't do that. So I represent one of the communities. I know everyone thinks of North London as chai latte central, but actually I've got high levels of poverty, high levels of inequality, a lot of it driven by gentrification. So real social, cultural challenges, a very diverse community.
Big differences,
yeah. So all of people who will feel firsthand, whether it is we get security wrong, we get the economy wrong, we get society wrong.
You see
so I feel, and that should be the discipline, shouldn't it? The discipline isn't, can I have an argument with you about 10 years ago? The argument is what you're going to do for the next 10 years. That's the big idea. And that's a test I hold myself to. I hold my own political movement to. Yeah. And I'll put myself towards the country.
I mean, arguably, you know, Brexit was about sovereignty. The Tories failed on controlling the borders. He got kicked out. That's the single biggest error, maybe the past 14 years, was not controlling numbers.
Well, you're going to put you're saying Brexit. Oh my gosh!
You started it.
Gosh, I finally won an argument. I don't think you can make Brexit work, but I do think you can solve the problems it's created. And if one of the problems,
opportunities out there,
but if one of the problems it's created is that we're not talking to our allies about how we use soft power alongside hard power, that I think is a mistake. So one of the things I will be going to the Assembly next week to is to make the argument that if we're going to talk about cooperating on defence and security, we need to cooperate on aid as well. And I actually think the British public, wherever they were on the Brexit debate, because there are no Remainers, because we left, right, would agree that that sounds a sensible and pragmatic thing to do. I think that's very different to the kind of, let's treat you like a baby. Let's say somehow if we cut the aid budget, everything's going to be fine, or there aren't difficult consequences to that, any more than if we say there aren't ways we could do that better. I'm all for grown-up politics, but I think you have to manifest it yourself.
But you're not here next week for the big conversation about benefit cuts, are you?
Oh no, it's Monday. Don't worry, I'm sure.
Because you want to get involved with that. I mean,
do I want to get involved? Yeah, look, of course I do, because I see it as interconnected.
Do you agree that we should be cutting the benefits bill?
Oh, do I agree that the benefits bill doesn't reflect what the challenges are that we need a welfare state to support? Yes, absolutely. Because it is a travesty to me that you've got 1 million young people who can't find a job that gives them a purpose, a sense of purpose in life. Do I think that then becomes about, right, if we cut your benefits, somehow that's going to magically appear? No, and actually I don't think that's where the government is. I know that's a nice, easy kind of tweetable Are we allowed to say Twitter anymore? It was Xable.
Xable.
An Xable statement. And I think that's also very separate from, look, there are people with long-term health conditions, MS, early onset dementia. I had a constituent come to me about his mum that just broke my heart looking at it. But also one of the things I thought reading that is it's already too complicated to be able to properly support your mum, because somebody gets a diagnosis like that, the last thing you want is 500 different forms. So absolutely, there has to be change in the system. The question is, what direction is the change going to take you?
Too much?
Well, look, first and foremost, the worst way of making policy is to start with the number and work backwards. That's how we got to the bedroom tax. And what we all know about the bedroom tax is it costs more than it saved. I am, as I say, ruthless that there is nothing progressive about wasting money.
Benefit has also hurt women most.
Absolutely, because right now we have an unequal society, so more women are out of work than should be. But that's one of the reasons why yesterday I was banging the drum in Parliament that we need to get paternity leave right. The gender pay gap is costing us £23 billion as a society. That would be great for getting growth going. That's a longer term aim than one of my other objectives, which is to get a much better deal with Europe, which is a much quicker way to get growth going as well. I represent all the things that probably challenge you, Chris, but we can have a conversation.
Nobody knows how I go here. I'm a political editor here at GB News. Were you at the briefing on welfare benefit cuts?
I have not yet had my invitation, but I say us older people. There's nothing to make you feel aged as kind of when other members of Parliament tell you the year they were born and you were leaving university at that point. And that's a good thing. I'm out old and ancient, as my kids tell me.
Yes,
partly because my partner has told them that he's 21, which is most unfair.
How many Labour MPs might be objecting to cuts to welfare, or is that argument gone?
We don't know. Look, there's lots of people having a debate, and I know you want me to say, everyone's going to hate. Nobody knows what the proposals are right now, right? Old-fashioned idea. Come on,
it could be frozen.
Grown up politics requires actually having a look at something, stress testing it, kicking it around. Yeah. That's why I'm passionate about the political parliamentary process. That's why I table amendments, I table questions, I debate things with ministers. Because the worst thing in the world is any government, any politician who thinks they're right all the time. Of course, you need to hear arguments. So, yes, do I think there's going to be people with lots of questions? It is complicated. Like I say, the benefit system doesn't work right now to support those people as it is because it's too complicated. Because if I could get rid of all my benefits casework, my staff would be a lot happier and a lot less stressed. So we know things need to change. How do you change them to make it simpler? How do you change it so that you don't treat everybody the same? Like, somebody who's got a mental health condition, some of that is about changing employers' attitudes, about working with people, about changing the workplace. Somebody who's got a progressive condition, one that comes and goes, needs a different approach. Surely it isn't beyond the wit of all of us to work in a more complex way to represent people.
What do you want from your government?
I want the world because I believe that this country, I'm a patriot to my core, and I want the world for this country. This country has been driven to the ground in the time that I've been in Parliament, and I want hope, and that hope comes from seeing the potential of people. So I want us to be absolutely ruthless about getting things right.
You walked the 100 yards in opposition. You were there for 14
I did. I banged my head against that brick wall.
The past 7 months is new to you because you went to government the first.
But I've never ever believed that you only have power if you're in office. I believe in the power of ideas. Again, that's why I got into politics in the first place.
You've shown that. And in fact, you remind me of our next guest, David Davis, which you might object to.
And I tell you, David and I work together on things. Because one of the things I believe very strongly is that you should be ideological, not tribal. I can't bear the kind of bear pit, red team versus blue team, because that's disrespectful to the public. Have an idea, fight for it. Yeah. But if you agree on stuff, so David and I are both libertarians. David and I both stand up for human rights together. We'll disagree on things like Brexit, and we can have that conversation too. Sure. Yeah. But where you can find common cause with people, I'm letting down my constituents in this country if I don't find those common causes. That's ideological. You can only do that if you're confident about what you stand for. Now, that I'm sure you'll think comes across as arrogance, but I know what I believe and why I got into this job. I'm constantly testing it against what is possible and how do we make the chance to get there. You can't do that if you're sitting there going, oh, you're a Tory, I can never speak to you, any more than if you are somebody saying, oh, you must be in a coalition. That's why I'm not with those people who want progressive coalitions, because I believe there's an important difference.
Is this perception, all this idea that why you're not in government now, because you should be rewarded with a spanning government after all that
Oh,
time.
don't be daft. There's lots of incredibly talented people in the government, and they're all. I know they're young. Listen, Chris, we all get replaced by the younger, smarter mothers eventually. No, look, I adore the job that I do. I adore the community that I represent. If I don't give a shout out for Walthamstow as God's own country,
absolutely,
and the place that gets me out of bed literally every day, whether it's complaining about the fact our escalators don't work in the station or wanting social justice, all of those things, it is a privilege to be part of that. This world is really scary right now. I think across the House, people are terrified about what could happen next. There's a level of instability and uncertainty. I've always believed you have two choices. Whatever is ahead of you, whatever role you play, you either run away, find a cave and hope it's going to pass, or you get stuck in. I've still got enough energy to get stuck in, and those are the things that you're talking about.
And what's next for you? What's on your agenda?
Well, so obviously I'm the chair of the Labour Movement for Europe. So we are looking at how do we get growth from Europe? How do we get rid of I'm a red against red tape. I mean, many of your listeners will be shocked about the amount of red tape Brexit has created. And I'm pretty sure that's probably not what they voted for.
It's not what they voted for.
We need to get rid of all of that because that's hampering growth. It's hampering small businesses. I am passionate about the role of equality in growing the economy, that actually there's loads of people who don't get a look in because of the way in which we work. And if we did that, we'd unlock their talent. They'd contribute. Somewhere in my community is a kid who could cure cancer. But because it's an unequal society, because right now the bank of mum and dad is the best chance you've got rather than your ability, they don't do that and we all miss out. Well, what if we change that round is what I think about. So I'm doing a lot of work on making that argument because I recognise there's this kind of vibe politics coming here from America that somehow it's all the fault of the ladies. Who's it? The Darren...
Not the ladies.
It is, the man who said that you've got to have competent white men in charge. I mean... that's selling. Well, okay, but let's be frank about it. There are people who are using that language here.
Well, we have Reform UK. They don't use that language. Reform UK is the vibe party, aren't they?
Totally.
They haven't got
totally, and they're trying to tell men that this isn't for them. They're trying to tell them that nobody cares about men. Well, I've got news for Reform. The only person who's been standing out fighting for men's rights in the last couple of weeks in Parliament is me, because I've been the one fighting for them to get paid and protected paternity, right? So they can be there and be the kind of dads they want to be. So you could go all the vibes you like. If you actually want a difference, look at who's fighting for you. Is my question.
Is that your challenge to Reform UK?
Totally. Reform were missing in action yesterday when I was there making the argument, and yes, challenging my own government. Reform were missing in action. So the people fighting for men's rights, because actually it's not an either or. Like, I want to end the battle of the sexes when it comes to childcare. I'm very lucky in life to have a partner who's an equal partner. I'm very lucky in my life that my dad has been a central part of my life. But I know there's too many families where that's not been possible for people. Changing that would benefit everybody. It doesn't always have to be an either or. That's the exciting thing about social justice.
Who back, and we're told by Reform UK, it's Labour and former Conservatives who back Reform UK. They say that you are the same as the Tory party. That list of policies I listed there were ones you might expect in the first year of a Tory government. Do you worry the vibes people who just want to say, they don't actually come up with any answers. Like, when you've got a world this difficult and this uncertain, what you need is answers. You don't just need another person sitting there going, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. Yeah. We've all met those people in life. And actually, they don't actually want to get a grip of things. They don't actually want to make things different or better for people. They just want to have a moan. They say they want to make it better, of course.
Show us. Where were they when it came to fighting for families? Like I was doing yesterday, they were missing in action. I will judge people, because the suffragettes taught me, deeds, not words.
Just finally, so good to have you on the podcast today, Stella Creasy. So you don't want to rejoin the European Union? Just to clarify that for this podcast.
No, because it would take too long. I think we've got a salvage operation, right? Brexit has been a catastrophe for this country, but the time we've got to try and salvage the businesses who are going bust, who don't want to invest, the people whose jobs are going because someone said, well, actually, you can't travel overseas, is about 18 months, 2 years. The
economy in the EU is even worse than here in parts.
Well, actually, it's all about how you work together, isn't it? Our trade with Europe is still bigger than our trade with anybody else. And we've put up massive barriers to that. And now our security is with Europe. And I think people are seeing that. Okay. And, if it takes people like me fighting and saying, look, stop talking about red lines, get in a room, talk to the people who share your concerns, let's work through this together. That's what this country needs.
And so Stella Creasy, Brexiteer, thanks for joining us.
Your headlines are this. I'm Euro curious. I'm not Eurosceptic. That's the thing. What could we do with them is my question.
Stella also has a brilliant podcast called
The Mumifesto, which is about how parenting influences your politics.
Everyone tune into that. Now, last week in the House of Commons, a veteran Tory MP, who often is well ahead of where issues are going, stood up in the House of Commons and said this to Sir Keir Starmer.
4 weeks ago, the Northern Ireland coroner accused British soldiers of unlawful killing after they engaged with IRA would-be murderers. After careful reading, as far as I can see, this judgment was based on no evidence whatsoever. Over 100 Special Forces soldiers have been summoned before these inquiries. Not one IRA leader has been summoned in the same way. Soldiers that serve our country with honour, heroism and skill are being punished in their declining years for doing nothing but carrying out their patriotic duty and facing enormous risks. Now, given how he opened his comments today, which I associate myself with, does he not think that he and his government have a duty to protect these soldiers from such partisan parodies of justice in their declining years?
That was Sir David Davis, of course, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister and the MP for Goole and Pocklington, and he joins me now. Sir David Davis, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
For literally a long time.
Decades.
I do. What were you concerned about? What issue are you trying to raise with that question?
Well, there was a inquest in which the judge came out with something which was, in my view, completely based on his own views, not based on evidence. And that was he blamed a number of SAS soldiers with effectively unlawful killing of, frankly, for terrorists. Let's not mince words about it. Would-be murderers.
During the Troubles.
During the Troubles, it's 32 years ago. And these terrorists had just come from shooting up Coal Island police station with a heavy machine gun, a machine gun whose bullets are 5 times as big as a rifle.
Right.
Huge machine gun.
Right.
And they were actually trying to arrest them, but it became clear that they couldn't do that without risking their own lives and those of the policemen with them. So they shot the terrorists, which was the only thing they could do because they would have been discovered. And he said this was unlawful killing. And in my view, this was unmitigated nonsense, dangerous nonsense, which undermines the whole basis upon which the army worked.
So fast forward to now, that ruling is having a bearing, you think, on the way the SAS deploy?
Well, it's having a bearing on morale in the SAS. And frankly, if I were 20 today, I wouldn't join up, because, you do your job. You go out and take on a terrorist, deal with it, put your life at risk. And then for the next 30 years, you're in court, for doing a patriotic duty. So, it's mad. And it's down to politics, I'm afraid. We have gone from recognising these people are terrorists, would-be murderers. Don't forget, the IRA killed lots of civilians. Forget the soldiers for a second. The Omar bombing, I think 29 dead, 200 odd injured. They're completely ruthless murderers, gangsters. Are any of them being prosecuted under Article 2? No, it's politics. And this is a problem.
I thought lawfare had been stopped. There had been this issue, hadn't there, with Iraq and the rest of it. You're just defining you're discussing what lawfare, isn't it, where lawyers come after soldiers after the event.
And to be fair to the past Conservative government, I think under Boris, they attempted to deal with this, a thing called the legacy legislation. And Labour have said they're going to do away with that, which is why I raised it at Prime Minister's sessions. And it was notable that the Prime Minister was more conciliatory than he normally would be to a with question with me. And I think they've got to think, well, if we do away with legacy legislation, which would have protected the soldiers, we're going to have to replace it with something else which does the job properly. And that's what I'm after. That's what I'm trying to do.
Do you think the legacy legislation was faulty?
It might have been. I mean, none of the parties in Northern Ireland, even the DUP and the UUP, supported it. Yeah. So they obviously saw some flaws with it. And we have to bear it. I mean, look, what do we want to do? What we want really is a peace and reconciliation process, not a vengeance and vindictiveness process, which is what we got at the moment.
Is that why language has changed? I'm fascinated by the fact that in government writings, in speech, in statements, they talk about the victims of the Troubles. The words terrorists aren't news. And I've grown up with the IRA being a terrorist group.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, what's going on here?
Well, partly I think it's to try and appease sort of Sinn Féin, frankly, because
They're now in power in Northern
now
Ireland.
in power.
And they were the former political wing of the
and
IRA.
an important part of the new piece, as it were, and so we're trying to sort of keep all that coalition together,
Right.
And so you can understand, but they're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to make the British Army, who did a magnificent job, frankly, make them the villains and make the IRA the heroes. Whereas in fact, the IRA were gangsters, killers. And the army, 250,000 soldiers served in Northern Ireland. And how many events did we have? And whenever anybody died at the hands of a British soldier, there was an inquiry.
Bloody Sunday famously.
There was an inquiry back then. And Lee Clegg, who got found guilty of murder, eventually he was exonerated on appeal. We didn't treat our soldiers as being above the law. We imposed the law on them. What this is doing is imposing a new view of history, and that's what's wrong.
And it matters right now because we're about to see British troops being deployed on the ground as part of a peacekeeping force in Ukraine.
Yes. And we have some of the best soldiers in the world. We certainly have some of the best special forces in the world. And it's just wrong to take these patriotic people, put their lives on the line. They're heroic and they're skillful. And say, well, sorry, but in 20 years' time, we're going to turn on you. Not good enough.
Well, let's see how that plays out. I'm going to ask you about the politics at the moment. You're a former chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. You've been here before on what this government's trying to do by cutting spending and crimping the civil service. They're cutting welfare maybe by $6 billion next week.
Yeah. I mean, look.
Is that enough?
Well, probably not. But the difficulty here is how they're going to carry it through. I mean, bear in mind, you've got a couple of key factors of politics. Number one, this is a brand new government, and frankly, the ministers are not very competent. They haven't. It's not hardly surprising. This is almost their first job for many of them, and so they're being driven by the civil servants rather than the other way around. We saw that with a budget, and secondly, although they've got a big majority, that majority is a mile wide and an inch deep, and a lot of Labour MPs will be terrified of what's going to happen in their own constituencies when the welfare cuts come home to roost, when the winter fuel issue comes home to roost, when the treatment of farmers, all these things start to make them very, very.
Aren't you just a Conservative MP saying that, aren't you? Or you're being.
No. Bear in mind. I mean, I've got a lot of Labour friends. I mean, that's one of my USPs.
Yes.
I work across the chamber.
You do.
And they are. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, there are Labour MPs saying to me already, I'm only going to be here for one term. I know it already. Now it's the first time I've heard that for a long, long time.
And given the scale of that majority, you're surprised. Yeah. Why do you let Rachel Reeves off the hook there by saying civil servants got their way with the budget? Those were her choices.
Yeah, no,
that she was hemmed in by her. She wouldn't raise income tax, national insurance.
Well, partly she was locked in by her own foolish promise.
That is why is it?
But also, what happens? When you arrive in a new department, they come along and they bring you all the ideas that they couldn't get previous ministers to do, and that's what they did with her. I mean, this is, in my view, this is the origin of the inheritance tax on farms.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, quite. That has been looked at before. I think that.
Everybody says it down. When I was in the department, I used to ring up my successor on the first day and say, "Read me your opening file."
Yes.
I'd tell them which ones I'd turned down.
You're watching the implosion of Reform UK.
Yeah, I mean,
with a quizzical eye in the recent.
Yeah, because all these people, I get on with. I like them. I mean, Nigel Farage has been a friend of mine for decades, but Nigel does have this habit, really, of falling out with anybody who's any challenge to him. And, they are behaving in a very odd way. I mean, referring somebody to the police, 6 months after the event. I mean, if there was an issue...
It was December last year, so it's 4 months after.
For whenever, but it's still quite a long time after the event, And if we did that, I think Nigel would accuse us of being woke. So
have they gone woke, Reform?
No, I think this is just internal, this internecine fighting. But I'm afraid, what's Reform's weakness? Reform is able to say, we will do this and we will do that in very clear language. They can do it partly because they've never been in office. And their weakness is people saying, well, will they actually be able to do this? Well, this tends to say no. This tends to say they'll fall apart. If only 5 of them fall apart, what's it going to be like if there are 50 or 200.
It's a protest party at the moment, isn't it?
It's a protest party.
We haven't got a front bench.
It's a very effective protest party. Look, the Tory party almost created them. We weren't proper Tories for too long, right? And we created a vacuum, and Reform stepped into the vacuum. Now I'm hoping, and I think she will, that Kemi will fill that vacuum, and then there won't be a place for them. But that's it.
So they're a symptom of a sickness at the heart of the Tory party.
Yeah. Which, is being cured as we sit here.
Is it though? The polls aren't great.
No. Look.
Is it not best to just to lance the boil, if we carry on our metaphor about the sickness, and merge the two parties, Reform, Conservatives?
No, because Reform, as you said, they're a protest party. They would not be able to cope with the restrictions of having to be a responsible opposition. This? People say, is this 97 or whatever? It's nearest to 1975 when we put Thatcher in. Why? Why did we put Thatcher in? We didn't even know she was going to be any good. We were sort of keeping our fingers crossed. We did it because the party had failed to solve the answers. Complicated problems, Soviets were winning abroad, miners were winning at home, and so on. And she sat down and she said, okay, let's cut these supposedly impossible problems into small pieces, find the answers, and the public saw that and put us in power.
And here's what we believe, and set out some, and you've seen that from Karen Bailey now with her principles. She's setting out her policy reviews very shortly, possibly next week. We think we're seeing a whole polls. That might be
ECHR next week. I'll be there. Yeah.
You'll be there, yeah. ECHR withdrawal. So this is a chance, I think, for the party to reset.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be ECHR withdrawal, but
they're looking at it though.
But it might be ECHR rewrite, which is more the point.
You can't rewrite. That means withdrawal into your own version.
No.
What?
No. Germany is having trouble with ECHR. France tends to ignore the ECHR. Or Maloney will be on our side. Italy will be on our side. Most of the big countries of Europe will be on our side. Even Sweden.
So they see the overreach of that court and want to bring it back.
1978. Listen, that court was written, or at least the convention was written by Maxwell Fyfe. He fought in the First World War. He'd be spinning in his grave at the use of Article 2 today.
Who's he again? He
was a British Home Secretary. Very tough. In favour of capital punishment and so on. Not a sort of lefty wokey. And he wrote it, and it was written, and it was worked brilliantly until 1978, when the court suddenly decided it could extend it on its own bat. That's not the way laws are made in democracies, and we need to go back to sorting that out. And I think, Friedrich Merz in Germany, Jens Spahn, his sort of Home Secretary character, all very much where we are.
There's a common cause on this.
There's a common cause.
Will you part of this rethink of the policy? You're so interesting.
I'm going to be writing about it because I'm seen in the House as Mr. Civil Rights, but civil rights only works if the public believe in it. We need a court to keep governments in line. I don't trust governments; let them courts. Yeah. But it's got to be done properly.
Another area, Sir David Davis, you've been ahead of the curve, has been on the issue of Letby.
Lucy
Letby, the nurse found guilty of those murders of
7 murders and I think 8 attempted murders.
Have you met her yet?
No.
Have you spoken to her yet?
Yep.
So you've had no communication with her, but you've been in the House of Commons banging the drum for a rethink on that.
Don't need to talk to her. Look, if let's imagine for a second she is a mad psychopath, which is what the allegation is in effect. All the psychopaths I've met have always been charming and persuasive. Yes. Somebody who's been broken by the system often can't meet your gaze. So what am I going to learn from meeting her?
You just need to get you weighed up, don't you?
No.
Lord Longford in the old days were with Murray Hindley.
Yeah, but Longford, you see, it's a bad example because Longford was taken in by that. That's the thing. I work from the hard facts. That's why sometimes I can get ahead of the games, because I take all the hard facts. It took me 4 months to decide on Letby, right? And now it's changed. The public mind on this has changed. A lot of the media's mind, everybody, but a lot of the media's mind has changed. And we have a phalanx of experts on our side. And now we're almost at the point of putting the CCRC application in.
That's a criminal compensation review, criminal case review board,
criminal case review commission, which will be important. We have some reports coming out every week. There's a new fact comes out about the doctors involved or about the case or, and so on. And I think, the real issue that worries me, and this is a really serious issue, is that this will take a long time. This is a young woman, who wanted to get married and have children. If this takes 10 years, bang goes that. And the trouble is with the CCRC, Andrew Malkinson, remember the Andrew Malkinson case? Accused of being a rapist, and then DNA evidence is son. Of course he did, and he was innocent. And the DNA evidence proved him innocent after 4 years. It took 17 years to get him out. We can't have that. And we need to fix that too. But there's my list of reforms are longer than my arms.
Let's go back to Farage. Do you think Farage actually wants to be Prime Minister?
Oh, everybody wants to be Prime Minister.
Even you once follows that.
I know.
I remember when
I never really. My problem was I never really wanted it enough. That was a different. Of course he wants to be Prime Minister. But the question is there a route for him to be Prime Minister? And I think the answer is no.
You can't see that in our current system.
No. Nigel's great part in history is he was probably the most important person in delivering Brexit. That's not a bad place in history to have, actually.
No, you were there too, and your blueprint was what Theresa May followed.
No, she didn't. That's the problem.
That's why I resigned. Do you think Rupert Lowe will be welcome in the Tory party?
No, I don't. I think, if anything, Rupert's a bit to the right of the rest.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage. So he's going to be an independent, and that's probably a right thing for him, to be honest. He has his own views. He's a great fan of Elon Musk and vice versa. But no, look,
you can't see him joining the party.
No, if somebody tries to burn down the golf club, you don't offer them membership. Yeah.
Well, so Dave Davis, long may you keep campaigning in Parliament. Thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast, and do come back.
I'd love to.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and watching Chopper's Political Podcast. This episode is a special one for us. It's our 50th episode since we started it with GB News. Not only that, but it marks a year since we started this wonderful adventure. I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this journey. We've loved every single minute of it. With that in mind, I've got some housekeeping to attend to. My two wonderful producers have voiced their opposition at the way I addressed them just last week. Sot. And Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan, they're the worker bees in the studio with me here. As a result of that faux pas, Rebecca and George have provided me with a statement they would like me to read out. I would like to sincerely apologise to Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan. They are two of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm so lucky to work with them. Without them, I am nothing. They put their heart and soul into each and every episode, from booking? It says here, mooking guests. They put their heart... Why am I reading this? They put their heart and soul into each and every episode, from booking guests to staying in the office long into the night to ensure every episode gets to you, our lovely viewers and listeners, on time each week. That takes a lot of patience, it says here, especially when I repeatedly ask them to things like, do we have the transcript of an hour-long interview just minutes before we finished our recording? I want to say deeply to you all out there, on behalf of me to you, I'm sorry, I've learnt my lesson and it will not happen again. I will certainly not call you worker bees anymore, George and Rebecca. As a gesture of my sincerity, I would like to present to you, our viewers and listeners, with a sneak peek behind the scenes of Chopper's Political Podcast. Enjoy it, if you have to. Coming up, so I'm used to that bit.
What? She doesn't even have to do that.
So you're literally like Anchorman. You're just reading whatever's up.
I know. No, this is some privacy, please.
Basically, the bloke was too sad. We had
1, 2, 3.
Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast. I said that louder than him, better than him. He was slightly out of time, wasn't he? He was slightly out of time again.
Amateurs.
I mean, you know.
Right.
I brought tea.
You want me to look into the camera and go?
Am I coming in tea? No.
No, we can't
I've
see
tipped tea myself already.
Can't see it.
No, I used to get on my bike, which was a chopper when I was growing up, actually, to do little grocery rounds to, you know, elderly,
Actually, not a chopper.
elderly, not now, some of the elderly residents in the...
That's heavy. It was very. That's many times over twice your 2.5 my body times my body. You're like an ant.
Ready?
Wait,
Don't breathe in that weird way. Oh my god. No, you can breathe. Please breathe. Right, okay. Ready? Ready? Oh Lord. Here we are at Parliamentary Studios with the plan for growth. Milestones for It's a very good mince pie, this. James Murray, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. James Murray, thank you. I'm trying to hold it together.
Sorry.
It's hard enough being professional here with these idiots laughing at me.
And powerful.
I can't call him Chopper.
I know, I call him Chris as well, but coming out
the
on
nickname.
Chopper's Political
Made up
Podcast.
name.
No, it's not. It's not. I don't know where it came from.
I think Sir Keir Starmer is
Phones off your phones, although they won't work down here, right? Because we're underground. In journalism, are you a journalist or are you just a boring person?
Well, I think.
Thank you for listening to this podcast wherever you are. I tweeted Christopher Hope on X. Email me chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this show, please do tell your friend. If you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and help other people find it, and do the same for Stella Creasy's podcast too. Thanks to the great team of GB News colleagues behind the podcast, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh back at the GB News mothership, and here in the dungeon at Westminster, Rebecca Nunes and George Macmillan. And most importantly of all, thank you too for listening wherever you are. If you want more Chopper in your life, and Stella Creasy does, do catch me during the week on GB News and at midday on Wednesdays with my analysis of PMQs. But do keep up to date with our best reporting on our website, gbnews.com. Until next time, from me, cheerio.